Oh, well, we're due for a dose of common sense. Welcome to the immensely popular Catherine McGregor. Catherine, good evening. What on earth do you make of all of that?
Well, heart goes out to Chris for starters, and I'll talk to you off air too, Alan. I've got a number of pretty decent lawyers who've looked at that very same section of the Constitution you've been quoting and were warmly confident about running constitutional challenges to it. And I might be able to link Chris up with someone of standing in that.
Well, it can't be allowed.
It's a mess. And
you know, as you and I said last week, they can't be allowed to rip up the Constitution and remain unchallenged, can they?
Well, it really is dispiriting, and we have been. You know, last weekend looked at marked the 75th anniversary of the end of the Pacific War, and you look what this country endured, and it did it without tearing up the Constitution. Indeed, one of the most substantial cases on absolutely free intercourse among the states under Section 92, a unanimous decision of the High Court, was an appeal by a woman who travelled from Melbourne to Sydney without a Director General's pass, the kind of thing we're talking about right now. 7-0 in the Latham Court, Sir Owen Dixon writing a terrific judgment in that. The Constitution was sustained through that very difficult time as it was in World War I. So you despair of this really, and as you use the term executive fiat, so much of this is being done on Zoom conferences with no constitutional legitimacy whatsoever. And the disappointing thing, Alan, is that Scott Morrison is doing this in a collaborative spirit, is showing some flexibility and generosity. It will not be reciprocated. He's going to have to face the people with an eye-watering amount of public debt, a massive unemployment number, and as Paul Kelly pointed out in The Australian today, they're soaking up JobSeeker to fund border closures, effectively. That's what's going on. The Commonwealth coffers are being denuded while they shut borders down as though they're not part of Australia.
Absolutely. Catherine, just on this agriculture, what do you make of China's behaviour? You and I have talked about this every week in relation to Australia's wine producers. China's domestic wine producers have lodged this claim with China's Ministry of Commerce, citing 40 examples of what they say is unfair assistance to our wine industry from federal and state governments. And the Chinese wine producers have allegedly, they say, suffered because of government policy. A 79-page submission. What are China up to, Catherine?
Well, it's political coercion, and they threatened this. Their ambassador warned and specifically singled out wine and beef and said, wouldn't it be a shame, after our referral to the World Health Organization of the origins of the virus, we were told there would be trade reprisals. The wine sector will hurt. 39% of our wine exports do go to China, but you look at the data, Alan, other than New Zealand, Australian wine is the least competitively priced in that China market. So the idea that we're dumping it is absolutely absurd. It's an affront. But this is China's standard in all of these liberal democratic global institutions. We look back now and rue the day we allowed them into the World Trade Organization because they've milked us. They've played this developing nation status, which is an absurdity, and they've devalued their currency for years at the expense of competitive trade outcomes. And the world sucked it up, expecting that China would inevitably liberalise, and every trend indicates they're not. And trade is just another weapon that they're using to coerce us.
So just one thing in your judgment, could other exports become potential targets?
Well, they've already targeted barley, and beef. And beef. And look, they're very dependent on iron ore. No doubt they would love to hurt us, but as Tony Abbott made clear in his Sydney Institute address, they trade out of pragmatism too. So they don't do anything that they can't find another source for. So I think where Australia's got to do now is look for alternative markets firstly, but also start to look at, in a concert of like-minded nations, take on this developing nation status. Absolutely. You know, a lot of people were whinging when Australia, when aspersions were cast on that. But the idea that this global juggernaut is a developing nation and somehow requires almost a helping hand up when it's coercing and bullying other trading nations and is a parody of a free enterprise economy, I think it's really gone past a joke, to be honest. And it's time for us to start hitting back. And as Tony made clear in his speech, like for like. Like, how dare, when our borders are closed, we're talking about opening an air corridor for foreign students to come into Adelaide, when poor blokes like Chris can't go 50 miles across a border. Like, what kind of lunacy is this?
Catherine, before you go...
Goodness me.
Before you go, the Democratic Convention, and Michelle Obama made this speech full of bile and vitriol, but I was interested what she said about the presidency. She said, I know all about presidents. She said, it's a job, it's hard, it requires clear-headed judgment, a mastery of complex and competing issues, a devotion to facts and history, a moral compass and an ability to listen. You can't fake your way through all of this. Poor old Joe, he doesn't pass the grade on any of those issues.
Well, that's going to be the interesting thing. And the thing that struck me about it, Alan, wasn't that she had departed from a more or less unspoken convention for spouses of the chief executive not to engage in partisanship. What struck me as interesting, two things. Firstly, as you say, poor Joe now will underwhelm because every other speaker has had so much more ballast than he seems to be capable of mustering. So he's going to be an anticlimax. But don't forget that her husband's career was launched at a Democratic convention in 2004. This little-known congressman got up and gave a speech that riveted the Democratic Party faithful. I have no doubt this was an audition for her to have a run at some form of elected office later on. Good call,
Catherine. You're wonderful. Keep at it. We'll catch up. See you next week. Thank you for everything out there. Our viewers love you. There she is, isn't she wonderful? Catherine McGregor.